Welcome back. This is about crowdfunding part 2. As you know, we already talked about the marketing aspects of crowdfunding a week or two ago, and now we're going to talk about the financial aspects of crowdfunding.
Exactly, and like any good movie, it has a sequel. So this is crowdfunding part
This
2.
is son of
Yeah.
crowdfunding.
Exactly.
Okay, as you recall from our discussion of marketing, crowdfunding is when candidates, entrepreneurs, are exposed via internet platforms to a wide variety of backers that may help them financially and otherwise in their campaigns.
Exactly. So when you think about crowdfunding, you can think about that in a more systematic way in the following sense. You have, on the one hand, the entrepreneur, on the other hand, the crowd. And you can, you transmit project information, potential rewards towards the crowd. The crowd could provide you with seed funding and other non-financial resources like reputation, etc. We talked about that in the marketing part. But essentially, it's enabled by the web. And that's why we see it as a fairly new phenomenon, but a phenomenon that has taken off quite dramatically in the past few years. And therefore, it's very important to entrepreneurs in all kinds of regions on Earth.
So it's no surprise that crowdfunding has raised a lot of money over the last 5 years or so. In 2012, it was 2.7 billion. 2013, 5.1 billion. People projected, they haven't quite calculated for 2014 yet, but almost double that again. So it's really, really important phenomenon right now.
Worldwide.
Worldwide. Now these players, of course, they have their roles, and as we discussed a little bit in the marketing segment, their different roles switch around. Sometimes an entrepreneur becomes a backer, but in general, there's the entrepreneurs, there are people who like to make things, there are artists, there are fans, and there are many other roles, and people can back one and receive money from another, and generally speaking, take part in this crowdfunding ecosystem.
And some people even just want to spend time on a crowdfunding platform because it's also fun to watch. Yeah. And then they become backers just because it's fun to back others with exciting plans. Yeah.
So we think about the different ways that you can raise money through crowdfunding. And we've identified at least 5 or 6 here that use different mechanisms. And on the left side of these slides, what we've done is we have shown you examples of different crowdfunding sites that are actually out there right now that use these different methods. So the first one might be equity funding. And by equity funding, what that means is you're really giving up a piece of your company, just as we discussed already this past week. It's not quite set up in most countries in the world right now. I think the UK and Australia and Italy are examples of places where it's already legal. And the U.S. is moving down that road right now. So the issue being that when you have lots of equity backers, that you might be thought to have a publicly traded company. And so you have to have special rules in place to say, well, if it's a small amount of money, et cetera, then you may not be considered a public company.
It's a complicated problem.
It's a complicated problem. So equity funding is one way of doing it. Generally speaking, it's not the most common way. But it is something that you will see.
It's up and coming.
It's up and coming for sure, and more and more countries are doing it now. So another kind is for debt financing, and here your crowdfunding is going to be soliciting loans for you, and you're supposed to pay them back.
So it's an interest payment,
yeah,
which could be much higher than the current interest rates you get in bank accounts.
Yeah, usually it's a lower interest or no interest loan, depending on the site, but each one is different, and it is one of the options. Again, it's not one of the most common types of crowdfunding schemes, but it is something to be aware of in case you are able to get that kind of financing. So the third type is called reward-based crowdfunding, and that's where you make a donation and you get some kind of reward back for having made the donation.
And we brought some examples with us.
Yeah, this is actually something that our assistant Netra did. She actually went onto this crowdfunding site, as you can see on the slide, and in recognition of having donated some money, what she was able to do is she got a photo of the artist and she got a sample of the textile that would be used. And then eventually she made a donation and she received this
little wallet.
handsome purse, mini purse, as the reward for having made that donation. The next kind of schema is the pre-sales. And we talked a little bit about this in marketing. So this is where you have a prototype, or you are not quite ready for production, but you are actually selling your inventory in advance. So it's a great way of reaching your market and of getting money to help finance the manufacturing or the growth of your business. That was pre-sales. Now for sales, some sites like Tilt here are setting it up so that if you reach your goal, you could actually continue to sell as an additional sales channel, like an e-commerce site, selling your products or services on their site after you've reached your goal. So then you've got your pre-sales, and then once you make your goal, you then keep selling through that channel.
Which actually kind of a nice solution here, because you can stay on the same platform. People know that you're on the platform, so you can move from pre-sales to sales very efficiently. And that's also kind of nice for this platform, because they keep the companies when they're operational. So it's, I think, a win-win strategy by both sides.
And the last scheme for crowdfunding is what we're calling in-kind contribution. Now that's where someone may say, hey, I will do your marketing plan for you, or I will help you advertise. Basically, people donating their time. And this is where it's kind of this funny fine line between crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, because crowdsourcing is actually trying to solicit services or knowledge from people across the internet, across the world. And what this is also saving you money, because now you don't have to pay someone to develop a marketing plan for you.
Exactly, and it can help you to figure out also for what other things you might have to raise money, because there's no one out there who can help and support you with your activities or with the type of resources you're looking for.
Right.
So you've seen all these examples, but you might still ask yourself, why do I need crowdfunding? Why should I do it? The marketing aspects are one thing, but the financial aspects are another thing.
Right. So I think that, it's a great source for seed financing, across a very wide range of dollar amounts. And except for the one case that we discussed already, where you have equity crowdfunding, most cases the backers do not take equity in your venture.
Exactly, and you should remember also that you are obliged, to actually use the proceeds that you get from your crowdfunding campaign according to the purpose you proclaimed. So it's keeping your promise to do the things that you actually promise to execute.
And if you don't do it, then of course it can have really bad, reputational effects for you too. So it's really important. Sometimes it's obligated. In most cases, you want to do it anyways.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the funding options here. We want to draw a distinction between two types of funding options, and it may influence how you set up your crowdfunding campaign too. So the first one is going to be called fixed, which is all or nothing. You basically, if you don't reach your threshold, you don't get any funding. And the other is called flexible, which is where you get to keep whatever you raise regardless of what your goal is. We'll talk about the pluses and minuses of each of those next.
So the fixed funding schemes, the all or nothing, the pros are fairly evident. You have a solid dollar amount goal, that is transparent for everyone, for you and for others. It creates some sense of urgency, and it could be a concrete motivation, especially if you are getting close to that amount. People might say, oh, I helped this guy, I feel sorry for him that he cannot reach it, or I feel motivated now to actually support him.
Or you call all your friends and say, oh,
I just need
right?
500. It's straightforward for the backers, and it builds trust, because you say, okay, I only do it if I reach that amount. It's in a way communicating to others, well, if I don't reach that amount, it's useless to start that project even. So it signals also that it's very well thought through.
Right.
And this option is offered on almost every type of crowdfunding platform out there.
Right. Now, in terms of the negatives here, if you don't reach your goal, you get nothing in general. Now, there may be some options in certain sites to make you pay a higher fee in getting what you got instead of your goal, but in general, you don't get anything. So there's definitely some pressure there. There's also pressure to deliver something creative, because you want to attract the backers and you need them to give you the money, or else you won't hit your threshold target. And lastly, this requires a lot of confidence. You have to feel like you are really going to get this amount. So you need to strategically think about what is your threshold that you're willing to shoot for, so that you can get all the amount. Now, usually, if in these situations, if you raise more than the amount, then you get to keep whatever is above your threshold as well.
Exactly.
Let's talk about a couple examples here of some fixed schemes. On this one on the left shows a smart remote, and it looks as if they were, set an initial target of $9,000 or something dollars, and they ended up raising $33,000 or something around that. And the second one was this watch that was, set to raise $60,000 or something like that. Ended up raising $372,000, and this became on this Indiegogo site called the in-demand option, which basically, as we mentioned before, allows you to continue selling on this channel through their channel because you've exceeded your goal by some vast amount.
So let's move to the flexible funding schemes now. And again, there are pros and cons towards that. I will talk about the pros.
Right. And I'm Mr. Negative.
You talk about the cons. Okay. So the pros are, I think, fairly straightforward again. It's because you do not have such a fixed target that you're trying to fill. This is not such an important strategic move to set that target. You can set one, you have a goal, but it's not important that this is reached. So it's not as significant as a strategic move. You therefore worry less about reaching your funding goal, and there's less timing pressure for your campaign. On the other hand, there are cons.
Yeah, so there's less of a guarantee for backers. I mean, it's not obvious that this whole thing will be pulled off, in some sense. And I think a lot of backers don't perceive it to be as serious of an endeavor as a fixed funding. And there could be potential for higher fees just because some platforms charge you more for small amounts of money, or if you don't make your goal, you may have to pay more, etc. You still get it, but you may have to pay a little bit higher fees for it. And it's not always offered on every platform. So basically, you don't have the opportunity to always do a flexible funding option. So here's a great example of a flexible one. This was the Flow Hive, and these guys invented a beehive that would actually deliver you the honey directly, so you don't have to go inside the hive.
And it's a very secure option.
Here you see they've raised $8.5+ million, and they're selling these things. So for $600, you can have your own hive. And they're careful to note that bees are not included.
But the interesting thing is, it's like if you look closely, they had a $70,000 goal on.
Yeah,
so that was a big surprise to the upside. Imagine asking for 70,000 and then getting 8.558 million. So that's an amazing multiple there.
Right. So what you want to do is you have to decide which platform you want to be on, and there are some big ones out there, but there are also a lot of smaller ones as well.
So there are lots of crowdfunding options waiting for you. So one key question is, who do you want to compete with for the money? Because there are if there are 5 million other projects out there, you are 1 out of 5 million. There are niche sites which have fewer people competing for money, and that might be, getting more attention to your project.
So there are also sometimes some of these platforms are specialized. They might have a certain geographic scope, some social goals. There may be different kinds of backers associated with the different sites. So it's really important to go through these things and decide what's best for you. What kind of site are you looking for?
And especially the question of what type of backers do you want to attract? And there are some backers might be on some sites and not on others. So this is quite an important question to figure out.
For example, they could have more customer-oriented ones that buy your product on one site versus people who want to make a donation on another site. And so if you're trying to sell something to people who want to make a donation, that may not be the best possible match toward the audience that you have there. Now, the niches could be large or small. And so what you have to think these through is, how big is your audience? What kind of potential do you want to reach? And what is the best site for you? To give you some intuition on what this means, we've given you a few examples here. For example, a geographic focus here. There's this one called the Cheetah Fund, which is not accepting new applications now, but was basically if you were based in Africa, had a good idea, and you made a goal, they might actually turn around and match some of that.
And here's another one.
This other one is this Carrot Mob, for example, very interesting. The idea here is you can create a mob that then helps out the entrepreneur. So if you have a small hotel and you need to have money for renovating the hotel. You need people to stay in the hotel to become more profitable. Someone, a backer, might organize all their friends to stay in your hotel, and then that would give you the money that you need to make your renovation.
So you just have to make sure that they have a pleasant time.
That's for sure. And then to think about your backer profile, basically, this is just advice to think this thing through. What kinds of person would you like to attract to be your backer? And then try and match that with the backers that are associated with the various sites. So, here, age, gender, interests. We already mentioned geographical location, what websites do they frequent, and some of their motivations. What do they want to do with this site? The backers, do they want equity in your company? Do they want early access? They want to really, really test out a cool prototype. They want to
feel good about themselves.
Feel good about themselves. Yeah, that's
some people just like to help, which is a great character trait. Like Chris is always trying to help people. No?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I'm always helping.
Exactly. So the backers are one part of the equation, but the other part of the equation is really the factors that attract backers to your site and gain the backers. It's one thing to get people interested, but another thing to get people committed. And there's actually research that shows the factors that are driving this process of gaining backers, and there are two major elements in particular. One is credibility, and the other one is appeal. So in terms of credibility, it's about your professionalism, and the feasibility of your project. That matters a lot. And the appeal means, well, is this a relevant issue, a relevant product, a relevant social cause that you're trying to address, and your understanding of the customer need and the desire.
How compelling it is. How compelling your story is.
Exactly. So you have to tell a nice and compelling story on the website, because people will judge you based on how well that is communicated. So credibility and appeal are two extremely important factors. And what is underlying all of this, what I'm talking about here, is the notion that you have to prepare very well. You need to understand what is appealing to your audience and how can you come across as being a very credible entrepreneur. This is not only, of course, important on the crowdfunding platforms. It's important in any types of social interaction. But here in particular, because people, they only see you on the net.
This is all they get from you, right?
Exactly, and you want money from them,
So as Mark said, these things take time. You need to budget your time to set something up that is compelling, that's credible, and that's appealing. You need to tell your story and tell your team's experience.
Because that engages the viewer. They will share your experience. They will understand why you're doing it, for what cause you're doing it, so they get enthused like you are.
Right. Be prepared. You need to make a plan, and you need to know what to expect. And then finally, you need to be realistic and relevant and creative in your rewards. Think through what would attract somebody. If I were to give them this, if they were to give me money, what would I give them? And how would they like that? And so you can be creative about these things, and you can sell some things, get gifts, depending on the kinds of platform that you choose.
And remember what we said in the marketing, because this is in a way, it's also marketing. It's like, spend imagination. And instead of money in that sense, spend imagination and your creativity in understanding what type of rewards might be particularly appealing to your target backers.
So bringing it back full circle, we think that crowdfunding is a very important topic for entrepreneurs today.
And that's also why it's a major part of this MOOC. And remember, you are developing your own crowdfunding campaign here in this MOOC, which allows you to raise funds to get your company off the ground. But it also allows you to win some additional funding, because we secured some funds to actually give the top performers in this course the possibility to win $2,500 in seed funding. Right. That's quite nice. Huh?
We're going to have a whole little tutorial about the specific details of how to get onto the platforms and how to actually integrate the course material with your crowdfunding campaign. We're going to do that later this week.
And just as a footnote here, I think this might be the only MOOC where you can actually win some money by learning something.
This is the only MOOC where we pay you. I think we said that already.
Exactly. So stay with us and keep on pushing. This is the segment on crowdfunding, and there will be other great segments on financing coming up.